book of Revelation speaks about certain signs. There are a few things you will need to know so you can understand the significance of those signs. Most Christians know the Bible speaks against consulting the stars for direction and revelation. We shouldn't follow horoscopes or seek out clairvoyance. There is, however, significant prophetic symbolism in how the ancient Hebrews viewed the heavens. Genesis 1:14 tells us that God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to divide the day from the night." But few of us remember or understand the next part in this verse. It says, "Let them be for signs, seasons, days, and years." We need to look at the Hebrew to understand what we are being told. The first word we will look at is sign. The singular form of the Hebrew word used is oth, which means a sign, particularly one associated with predicted events or divine presence. The most famous example of one of these signs is the Star of Bethlehem. The fact that the Hebrew word used in Genesis 1:14 is plural would indicate that there was to be more than one sign in the heavens. These signs in the stars were not meant to be personal omens like we find in astrology. All signs from God in the heavens are to confirm His promises to all mankind, both good and evil. There is no personal interpretation. The movement of the planets and the timing of the sun, moon, and constellations do not influence our personal destiny. The other word we will look at is the Hebrew word interpreted seasons. The word used is moedim, which means appointed times. This is primarily used in reference to the appointed feasts of the Lord. So we see that from the time God put the universe in motion, He had a plan so that man could see in the stars confirmation of His word. Revelation 12 contains one of the times God shows us His plan would be displayed in the heavens. John said, "And a great sign appeared in the heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon was at her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head." Others have published information about this event. However, none as yet has speculated how the rest of chapter 12 is played out in the stars. Part 2 will look at the Revelation 12 signs leading up to and following the alignment on 7/23/2017. Before we look at those heavenly events, we will need to have a knowledge of Hebrew astronomy. The Talmud identified the 12 constellations of the zodiac. This study is centered around 7 of them. The constellation Virgo is called Betula in Hebrew and means maiden or virgin. The Revelation 12 signs in the heavens will start from Betula. The constellation Libra is called the Scales in Hebrew astronomy. It represents the judgment throne of God. The constellation Scorpio is also a scorpion in Hebrew astronomy. The Hebrew name means conflict. We then come across the galactic equator. I have not found it written anywhere, but I believe it represents the division between the second and third heavens. The Milky Way is the galactic equator. The next constellation is Sagittarius. It is called the Archer, and I believe represents the second heaven. We then come to Capricorn. The Hebrew name for it is the young goat. I believe it may represent the earth. Following is Aquarius. This constellation is the water bearer and means pouring out in Hebrew. I think it may represent the seas and or the 7 vials of wrath found in the book of Revelation. These 5 constellations are our primary focus. They are followed by Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. In Hebrew astronomy, they also represent fish, a lamb, and a bull. The fish and lamb have obvious meaning for Christians. In Hebrew, Taurus is called Shor and means ruling. The first letter in ancient Hebrew script is Aleph. It looks like a bull's head. It represents God as the Almighty One. Taurus is flanked by 2 other constellations. One is Orion. In Hebrew, it is the glorious one, and the shepherd. This seems to signify Messiah coming to rule as the glorious one and the great shepherd. The minor constellations of interest are: flanking Betula is the Serpent and the Abyss. Next to Scorpio is the Redeemer holding the Serpent. Above the Serpent's head is the Northern Crown, made up of 7 stars. Adjacent to Sagittarius is the Southern Crown, made up of 10 stars. Also near Sagittarius is the Burning Pyre. In Arabic astronomy, it is called the Censer. Hebrew and Arabic astronomy are very closely related. This constellation may represent the altar of incense with the prayers of God's people that we find in Revelation chapter 8, verses 3 to 5. In addition to the constellations, there are 5 wandering stars. These wandering stars are the 5 planets visible to the naked eye. The first is Jupiter. Jupiter is known as the king planet and is called Sadek, which means righteous or just. It symbolizes the Messiah coming as king. The next is Saturn. Saturn represents Satan as the false king and false Messiah. The Roman god Saturn was also known in Greece as Kronos, the father of Zeus, and in Egypt as Osiris, lord of the underworld. Keep in mind that many of the pagan gods were perversions of divinely ordained truths. In Hebrew astronomy, some of the wandering stars were representative of archangels. The planet Mercury was named after the Roman god of commerce, travel, thievery, eloquence, and science. He was a messenger of the other gods. Mars in Hebrew is called Ma'adim, the Red One. Mars was the Roman god of war. The last is Venus. In Hebrew it is called Nogah, the Bright One, and it's also called Hillel, Morning Star, or Light Bringer. Another perversion of truth. Satan masquerades as a morning star. Yeshua is the true bright morning star. I believe that Mercury, Mars, and Venus all represent angelic beings found in the book of Revelation, messengers, warriors, and beings of the greater light. In both Matthew 24 and Luke 21, we see that the disciples expected that there would be a sign preceding prophetic events. Luke 21 verses 25 to 28 say that when the time of the Gentiles has run its course, there will appear signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and on earth nations will be in anxiety and bewilderment at the sound and surge of the sea, as people faint with fear at the prospect of what is overtaking the world. For the powers in heaven will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with tremendous power and glory. When these things start to happen, stand up and hold your head high, because you are about to be liberated. As I was putting together material for parts 2 and 3, I felt led to research some of the minor planets of our solar system. I have come to the conclusion that the following objects play a part in the revelation signs in the heavens. I will give some details about these objects, and then in part 3, we will look at their movement and possible significance. The first is Vesta. It is an asteroid that is classified as a minor planet. It is one of the largest objects in the asteroid belt of our solar system. It is named after the Roman goddess of the hearth, home, and family. She was a daughter of Saturn. You may have heard of the Vestal Virgins. They were priestesses in the worship of this goddess. Worship of Vesta was the last pagan cult to be forcibly disbanded in 391. Vestiges of it lived on in the form of Catholic nuns. Another place we see Vesta depicted in the church is in the flames of the Sacred Heart of Mary. Vesta was often symbolized by a flame. I believe that the minor planet Vesta represents Sheol, or hell, that accompanies Death, who rides on the black horse in Revelation 6. The second object is Ceres. It is a dwarf planet and the largest object in the asteroid belt that lies between Mars and Jupiter. Ceres was the Roman goddess of agriculture and grain crops. She is essentially Mother Earth. She also was another daughter of Saturn. The tradition of a bride and groom sharing a cake comes from this worship of Ceres. Part of the worship of Ceres includes days called the Mundus of Ceres. These were several days a year when an opening to a chamber to the underworld was unsealed. This was a time to communicate with the dead and to give offerings to agricultural gods and gods of the underworld. Ceres was a guardian to this doorway. The third object is Pallas. It is an asteroid that is classified as a minor planet. It is the third most massive asteroid. It is named for the Greek goddess Pallas Athena, daughter of Jupiter. This is a name that Athena took after she killed her foster sister Pallas in friendly combat. Pallas is the goddess of wisdom. The fourth object is Juno. Juno is another asteroid that is designated as a minor planet. It is the 11th largest asteroid. It is named for the Roman goddess Juno. She was a daughter of Saturn and the protector and special counselor of the state. She was also a wife of Jupiter. Juno was the patron goddess of Rome and was called Regina, or Queen. She was depicted as a warrior. The fifth object is named Chiron, found in the outer solar system between Saturn and Uranus. It is designated as a minor planet and a comet. It is one of the 6 objects in our solar system with rings. It is named after a prominent centaur from Greek mythology. He was known for skills in medicine, hunting, music, and prophecy. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was a titan, that's a second generation of divine being, who was condemned to eternal punishment for stealing fire to give to mankind. Heracles bargained with Zeus to exchange the immortality of Chiron for the life of Prometheus. Prometheus was believed to be the creator of mankind. I believe Chiron represents the chief spiritual being that comes against followers of Messiah. The sixth and last object is Eris. Eris is the second largest of the dwarf planets. It is the 9th most massive object orbiting the Sun. It has 1 moon. Eris was named for the Greek goddess of strife and discord. I believe Eris represents the chief spiritual being that comes against Israel. In addition to the history of strife and discord that has come against Israel, the following history of Eris in the heavens during the 1st century also support that belief. At the time of the birth of Yeshua, Eris was in the constellation called the Great Sheepfold. After his birth, around 2 AD, Eris left the sheepfold. Around 15 AD, it was in the constellation called the Desired. In 30 AD, it was at Betula, that's Virgo, along with Juno. Eris left Betula around 40 AD. In 60 AD, it arrived at the constellation called To Be Slain. We call it Lupus, and left after 71 AD, after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Eris then went to the burning pyre, which is Ara, until about 89 AD. It was hundreds of years before it visited a constellation of any significance. The constellations visited seemed to mirror the coming of Yeshua, his provision for new birth, the Roman persecution of Israel, the destruction of Jerusalem, and ultimately the scattering of the children of Israel. In Part 3, I will show how these minor planets seem to have connections with the Revelation story.